The venue was receiving these angry, basically threat calls. This was all happening the day before the wedding. Hey fam, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Empowering Creativity, where I empower others through creativity and faith. Obviously, today's video is going to be more centered around faith than faith and creativity, because I'm going to be talking about my wedding, which is really exciting. I have a crazy story for you guys about what happened the day before our wedding and the crazy change that we had to make the day before our wedding. But before I tell you that story, I wanted to share with you 3 reasons why Peter and I did decide to have a COVID wedding, because we have been asked a few times before, why are you going through with a COVID wedding? Like, why not just wait until after COVID is over? There's a few different reasons, and one of them is that we don't know when COVID is going to be over, and we know restrictions, especially where I am in Canada, in a province called Ontario, and in our province, restrictions have sort of been fluctuating up and down and up and down, where at some points in our time of COVID, we have had restrictions where you can only have 10 people at a wedding, and then you've also had less restrictions where you are allowed 100 people at a wedding, indoors or outdoors. So it's sort of been all over the place. We don't know when COVID is going to end. Peter and I decided, you know, life moves on whether we are in a pandemic or not, and we might as well just make the most of it. I feel like that's sort of a life tip that can go along with anything that happens in life, because so many things can happen that are out of our control, but we just have to trust God, and sometimes we just have to make the most of what is going on around us. Another reason, so the second reason, is that Peter and I just sort of kind of wanted a smaller wedding, and we were both okay with that, and we thought COVID is a good excuse to sort of have a smaller wedding. Although I do admit that when we were adding up all the people that we wanted to come, like our family members on both sides, it was more people than I thought it was going to be. And of course, there's always going to be some sort of a difficult decision in choosing who to invite, because you might discover that you love a lot of people, like I did. And you obviously want certain special people to take part in your big day. So in some ways, having a smaller wedding can be difficult, but I feel sometimes I feel like with COVID restrictions, it actually makes it easier to know how many people you should invite in terms of how many people you are actually allowed to have at your wedding. So yeah, we were both really happy. We were both really wanting to have a smaller wedding, so that was the second reason. The third reason we ended up having a COVID wedding is just because I personally really wanted a winter wedding. I never really dreamed of having a wedding in general, because there were times in my life where honestly I didn't even know if I would get married, but that's another story. Anyway, when Peter and I got engaged, I thought, wow, it would actually be really beautiful if we had a winter wedding, because as I was looking at wedding photos and what I wanted for my own wedding, I really loved winter colors, winter themes. I loved having cedar in my bouquet, which is totally like a winter plant. So just little things like that, like the colors, the themes, the winter flowers. I loved all of those different types of things, and so I thought having a winter wedding would be awesome. I know a lot of Canadians don't like the idea of having a winter wedding because it can be very cold, especially during February, which is when we had ours. February is actually, I think it's like the designated coldest month of the year in Canada. So we might be looked at as a little crazy for having our wedding in winter, but that is what I wanted, and I do not regret a thing. So there you have it. Those are 3 different reasons why we decided to go ahead with a COVID wedding. If you yourself are thinking of having a COVID wedding, I'm obviously biased, but I encourage you to just go through with it. I know, as I said before, that restrictions, especially depending on where you are, restrictions can fluctuate and you don't really know what's going to happen, but it's also just a good excuse to really lean on God and trust God during this season. And it's so exciting to be able to spend this time with the person that you love and that you are going to spend the rest of your life with. I also have a few tips for you at the end of this video for planning a wedding during COVID. Stay tuned to the end, or you can just jump ahead because there will be timestamps below in the description. Right, so now for our crazy story of what happened the day before the wedding. So to give a bit of context of what was happening before the day before the wedding, We actually changed our venue about a week and a half before the wedding because the church that I grew up in opened up to being allowed to have around 50 to 60 people come for our wedding ceremony. Whereas our old venue, because of the city that it was in, would have only allowed 10 people to come to our ceremony, including Peter and I thought and prayed about it with Peter, and I said I would really like, especially my siblings, my family members, to be at my wedding, and those very special to me. So let's have it in a place where we can have more people. I messaged my old pastor and I said, hey, is this church available to have our wedding at? And he said yes. We started planning the ceremony more, but we had to find a new place to have a reception just because of COVID restrictions in the church. We were not allowed to have food or drink in the church. We had to choose a different reception venue as well. So we looked around, we found a place. By the time that every one of our guests got back to us, we would have had about 43 people coming to the ceremony and to the reception. Also, just to be aware, I am choosing to keep the names of the cities anonymous because I don't want any of these city councils or anything to get any hate or anything like that. I'm basically just choosing to keep a lot of things anonymous in this story, or nameless in this story. You know, where I grew up, obviously this is not it's not like anonymous, and if you knew like the church, it's obviously like not that anonymous, but I still, just for other purposes, want to keep the names anonymous. So what happened the day before the wedding was a person that was coming to our wedding, and it is not this person's fault by no means. She was just doing what any person would do for a wedding and trying to book herself a hair appointment to look nice for the wedding. Unfortunately, she was from a bigger city, and the smaller city found out that she was from this bigger city. And so the hairdresser in this smaller city said, absolutely not, we are not allowing you in to get your hair done because you are from this bigger city and you are going to spread COVID to all of us. Somehow this hairdresser lady decided that she was going to post some misinformation about our wedding on Facebook, and she posted, the wedding will be happening at this such and such a venue. Now that such and such a venue was our reception venue, unfortunately. This post got shared almost 1,000 times. Reception venue started receiving angry calls from people asking them why they were allowing this to happen. Of course, the people who were giving these angry calls did not care about the facts. They didn't care that it was actually less than 50 people, which was the restriction limit of how many people you can have indoors for a wedding celebration. We were definitely within those limits because we only had 43 people, including us, that were going to be coming to that reception. But as I said, the people who were giving the angry calls, unfortunately, didn't care about those facts, and they were just angry that the reception venue was allowing this to happen. As a result, the reception venue advised us to not go through with the reception at all. They basically said, A, this makes us look really bad, especially to the media. We want to be able to tell people, okay, there's no wedding happening at all. They want to be able to deny that they were having a wedding at all. So of course they offered us some compensation, but where my heart was at was that I had literally just invited some people a week before the wedding, and now it was the day before the wedding, and I basically was going to have to tell them, you can come to the ceremony, but you can't come to the reception. So me thinking about having to make those calls to friends was heartbreaking because I really didn't want to disappoint them. I basically just really did not want to disappoint people who were really looking forward to having a celebration all together. But after praying about it a lot, Peter and we had to make a decision basically within 10 minutes because they wanted to know about the offer for the rehearsal dinner that they gave us and everything like that. So basically by the time we finished praying, we had 10 minutes to make the decision. We decided to not go through with the reception just because the people who were in charge of our reception venue were also saying that it's quite possible there could have been protesters. If people were that angry about what was going on and they thought it to be true, then there could be protesters. And I didn't want to remember my wedding day as having protesters outside, or my wedding guests. I especially didn't want them to feel uncomfortable. Also didn't want anyone from the media coming and making any news articles about us, because we knew that sometimes the media can very much distort things, and our faces could have been all over the news saying, look at this big city wedding that had their wedding in a small city. I actually grew up in this smaller city, and there were only probably about 10 people coming from this particular bigger city. In the end, our reception venue did allow us to have a family dinner in the restaurant area of the venue. That way it didn't look like we were having an actual wedding reception. So we were still able to have a dinner with our family after our ceremony, and it was a really beautiful, wonderful time. I was still able to see all of my family and a few of my friends at the wedding ceremony, which was really awesome. Honestly, I almost cried when I saw them, because lots of them had traveled from different places and spent the time in a car for hours just coming to see me say my vows. And so that meant a lot to me, and it meant a lot to be able to have them for one of my life's most memorable moments, for sure. We were making the decision, Peter and I were also thinking, being able to have those people even just at a ceremony was such a blessing to us, because as I mentioned before, if we had had it in our original venue in a bigger city, then we would not have been able to have everyone. We would have been restricted to having only 10 people. So it was honestly such a blessing, such a miracle that we were able to have this wedding that we did, and I praise God for all of that. And even though there was a lot of stress the day before, and was just feeling really overwhelmed, because A, you're just emotional because you're about to get married, and B, there were so many ups and downs and lots of changes just the day before. So I think that was just really overwhelming to me in some ways. In the end, I look back on it as my wedding day was probably one of the best days of my life. Afterwards, we honeymooned in a northern Canadian city and had just a beautiful, awesome, wonderful time, giving each other our undivided attention. And there was a pool, an indoor pool and an outdoor pool, that there was some steam coming off. I was not going to bring my camera into the pool area with me, so whatever footage you see here is from a phone. We went outside and we built a snowman. We did lots of activities and just relaxed and had an amazing time. So we were able to enjoy free champagne because the lady in charge of tourism in this smaller city felt sorry for us. She actually wanted more people from outside of this city to come to their city because that really helped their economy. In the end, God is so good, and he continues to be good, and we have him to give all the glory to, because everyone was happy in the end. Being such a people pleaser, I was really happy that everyone else was happy, and everyone really was just understanding. It was just a beautiful, blessed time. If you are planning a COVID wedding right now, here are a few tips for you. One is to just keep the wedding date. That was one thing I was really glad for. We didn't change the date at all, because we had invited a lot of people to watch our wedding on a live stream. And so if we were to change the date, we would have had to tell all of those people that we invited for the live stream to join us on the live stream a different day. And so that would have been a lot of work. And so Peter and I are really glad that we decided to just stick with the date no matter what happened. The second tip would be to just be prepared that, well, depending on where you are, of course. I know different parts of the world, different parts of the country have different restrictions because of COVID. Just be aware that restrictions can change. And I would say, yeah, be prepared to only have 10 people at your wedding, because you never know what can happen. Third tip would be to try and keep your wedding small during COVID, because I would honestly say it's better to invite people last minute rather than sometimes getting people's hopes up and then having to uninvite them. The fourth and final, most important tip is to always, always, always keep your eyes on Jesus and pray with your partner every day about your wedding, and that will help you keep your eyes on Jesus and remember that He is the reason that you are getting married. If you have any questions about why we decided to have a COVID wedding, about the tips that I shared, or about the story that I shared with you, let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know if you've also already had a COVID wedding and if you would add to any of the tips I gave. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. All right, that is all from me, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.